It's time again for our friend Kendall Coffey, the author of Spinning the Law, famed attorney. Hey, Kendall, how are you, sir?
For you, happy Friday. Yeah, the weeks fly by fast. Doesn't that happen when people are getting older, that sort of time moves faster?
They always say that, and I can remember back to grade school when, it seemed like you sat in one classroom all day. It seemed like the days went on forever. The summers seemed like they went on forever, and now it's May. I mean, it's May.
I'm telling you, it's before you know it. But some great topics today, huh?
We do have great topics today, and if I can, I want to start with something that, of course, you were involved in Bush v. Gore back in 2000, hanging chads and the voting and the whole thing, and you were on the Gore side of the ledger, and some interesting remarks, or maybe not so. I'd be very curious to hear what you have to say about this. Former U.S. Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor expressing doubts now, all these years later, that the Supreme Court should have ruled on that case that helped decide the outcome of the election. She said it took the case and decided it at a time when it was still a big election issue. Maybe the court should have said, we're not going to take it, goodbye. The Tribune said that she said it stirred up the public and gave the court a less than perfect reputation. Obviously, the court did reach a decision and thought it had to reach a decision. It turned out the election authorities in Florida hadn't done a real good job there and kind of messed it up, and probably the Supreme Court added to the problem at the end of the day. Interesting. Were you surprised, and what's your reaction?
Yeah, I was surprised, and while I certainly disagree with the Supreme Court's decision, I'm not sure I'm crazy about using 13 years later, because one of the things about the decision-making process is, look, you assume that the people who are making the decisions, whether you agree with them or not, are making their decision according to their conscience, according to their best view of the law, the facts, and then the system has to move on. And so I was just intrigued about why the look back. Yeah, there was a lot of discussion at the time as to whether, because the issues seemed to be principally state law issues under Florida's election law, why the Supreme Court was getting involved. But they did. And while it's certainly intriguing that she would be questioning whether it was, a great idea to have acted as the court did, I'm not sure for the image of the court it helps to be second guessing itself publicly, because she was the swinging deciding vote. If what she's saying is, gee, maybe Gore should have been president after all, that's just not the way the decision making process works. Like it or not, you got to make the decisions. We all got to accept them and then move on.
Right, and she said that decision, and one of the reasons she's now reminiscing and now maybe changing her opinion, is that it stirred up the public and gave the court a less than perfect reputation. Well, if now by what she's saying, one could argue it could have the potential to do the same thing.
Well, and it does. I mean, does this mean that the Chief Justice Roberts is 10 years from now going to be saying, gee, maybe I was wrong on Obamacare after all? I hope not, because whether he was right or wrong, the whole thing that makes our courts work, our judges don't have guns, they don't have swords. It's all about accepting and respecting their decisions and accepting finality when it's a final decision. So yeah, I mean, I guess I appreciate her candor, but I'm not sure if it's a great thing for the institution of the Supreme Court to be sort of publicly second-guessing herself, especially on something with such dramatic consequences.
All right, let's move on a little bit to the investigation into the Boston bombing. I guess the revelations, legally speaking, that have come to light in the past week was the other day when those three friends, the 19-year-old friends, two foreign nationals here on student visas, were arrested. And, here we have another example of someone not overstaying the visa but not living up to the terms of the visa, actually allowed to leave the country and then come back in. No red flag, wasn't arrested and until, after the bombing they were picked up on those charges. But do we have well, obviously we have a problem, but tell me what it means when those two who were here illegally, as opposed to the American citizen who was arrested. I heard that they did not take their option for a bail hearing, and they agreed to be held voluntarily in confinement. What does that mean exactly?
Well, it means that they know that with the serious charges they're facing, and the fact that they certainly don't have any established ties to the United States, and there would be every reason to take off, that they're not candidates for getting released pre-trial. That's why they would be staying in custody, at least until the facts are further developed. And the charges are serious, Steve. In one case, the case of the U.S. citizen, the guy gave the FBI 3 different stories, completely different, and then finally came relatively close to the truth the last time. That's lying to a federal agent if it's true. And in terrorism cases, the sentence can go from 5 years to 8 years. As to the other two, they're charged with destruction of evidence. That is a very serious charge. So when you get those kind of serious charges, and especially with individuals who appear to be potential flight risks, they're going to stay inside of incarceration pending further developments in the case. It's just too big a risk that people might take off.
Well, let me ask you about something we've talked about before, and that's where this case against the surviving brother might go. And, of course, there was a lot of talk about him trading the death penalty for more information. And, of course, a female attorney has been hired or has been added to his legal team, someone who has been able to accomplish that, the Loeffner case and other cases, the Unabomber case, and now she's a part of his legal team. But there are other people who are of the opinion that this kid might have already given all that he has to offer and has nothing really else to trade during the time before he was read his Miranda rights, and that there's not a lot more information he could trade for. So knowing that this specialist is now on his legal team, knowing that he wants to avoid the death penalty, and knowing Eric Holder, as at least I think I do, a man who had went to the FALN terrorists and asked them if they wanted to get out of prison, a man who wanted to try Khalid Sheikh Mohammed in the civilian courts, a man who, in my mind, has never been tough on terrorists. It's up to him whether or not to seek the death penalty. Do you think that this will be a capital case when all is said and done?
I think it's going to be a capital case, and the key thing is what you addressed. Did he already give away whatever information he might have had, if any, that he could have traded for life in prison? Doesn't sound like much of a goal to put yourself in life imprisonment, but that's the best that can realistically be done in this case. And with all the evidence, unless he can make a deal with the government, it's going to be pretty tough to avoid a very, very serious risk of capital punishment in this case. Okay,
all right, now let's move on. We're talking to Kendall Coffey here on the Steve Malzberg Show, the Spinning the Law segment. California, and sometimes, unfortunately, they say as California goes, so goes the country. Lots of times that doesn't happen, thank God. But California wants to become, or could become, the first state to allow non-citizens to serve on juries. Now, I don't know if they're doing this out of the Obama kind of philosophy where you got to be fair, or if they have a shortage of available jurors, or but I mean, if I'm on trial, God forbid, for some kind of crime, I kind of want my peers to be citizens. Is that too much to ask for?
Well, I think that's a great point of an issue. Is this a trial of your peers? But there are just so many reasons why it's a bad idea. Fundamentally, jury service is a privilege, which someone who's not yet a citizen has not fully earned, and it's also a responsibility. A lot of people don't want to do it, a lot of citizens. And I was struck by the idea that, well, we can't get enough citizens who want to be jurors, so we've got to get non-citizens. Well, let me tell you, Steve, there is a problem with us if our citizenry doesn't want to participate in something this important. And maybe we've got to do a better job about educating our own citizens so that they'll want to participate as jurors. But that's where the focus needs to be, not reaching out to all the complex issues that you would have about getting non-citizens on the jury. You mentioned some, but then you get into a lot of issues about the status, what's going on with the immigration proceedings. Is a green card good enough? Is a visa good enough? For me, this is just a bad idea from the beginning. Let's get our citizens better informed if they're reluctant to serve on jurors, because it is an important and a sacred responsibility in our system of justice.
Yeah, and many are reluctant to serve on juries because they don't have work might allow them to serve. I think legally they have to let them go, but I don't know if they have to pay them, and then they get a pittance, expense money to transportation money to serve on the jury. I'm not saying make it a career, make it able for someone to make a career out of serving on juries, but maybe have more consideration for the way it's done and not let them know the last second whether they're going to have to go in that day. So there are things I think that could be done to make it more appealing and easier to deal with, because I know people, some I guess, would like to be able to serve, but it's a work hassle. You know what I mean?
Well, and you know what? I mean, for me, it's sort of like when my wife kind of insists that I go to the opera with her. I kind of dread it. I don't want to do it. But, after I do it, I say, that's not so bad. It was really, really very, very interesting. Most people actually are pleasantly surprised, however much they don't want to do it before they serve on juries. Most people are pleasantly surprised as what a positive experience is. And probably a lot more positive for many of us than going to see the opera.
Which is the last opera you were dragged to?
La Tatiava, something like that.
Okay, something like that. I love it. You're like me. That's exactly what I would say. Something like that. Hey, Kendall, that's probably why we get along so well. I thank you, sir, for your time as always, and we'll speak next week, sir.
Oh, okay, Steve. Thank you.
Thank you. Kendall Coffey, ladies and gentlemen.